Hi, this is Sana from Ready and Thriving, and we love to have blooms around us all year long. And one of the techniques for doing that is to so-called deadhead flowers so that they'll rebloom. But which plants do you deadhead and which do you not? It can be kind of confusing. So this is a quick video to go through kind of the rules of thumb, and also to give you very specifics on certain plants and why it is you deadhead or not. So let's do a really quick quiz to see what you think. So for roses, do we deadhead roses? Yes, we do deadhead those. And almost all varieties. There are a couple that you don't. What about geraniums? Oh my gosh, yes, deadhead your geraniums and you will be rewarded with so many more flowers. What about daisies or things that look like daisies? Yes. What about peonies? They're kind of similar looking to a rose. But no, we do not deadhead peonies. And we'll get into why that is, even though they seem so similar. And what about begonias? Very common, beautiful plant. No, we don't deadhead those either, and we'll let you know why. And finally, what about these? What about azaleas? Well, it depends. Yeah, not a very nice answer, but we'll get into the particulars of what are the differences, and then you'll know. So this particular variety, no, we don't, which is really nice, but there are some types of azaleas that you do. And often it's based on the variety, the type of heritage that a plant has, your goal for the plant, like is it really just for generating flowers, and also the timing that you've gotten to it and whether you should deadhead it or whether it risks not having flowers next year. We'll get into all those in just a minute. So just a few notes about why would you deadhead in the first place. Well, there are two things. One is really about focusing that energy and where do you want that energy to go? And for a lot of plants, it is about reblooming. And so if you snap off the old blooms, new ones will form again, and you'll get a repeat of the flowers over and over again. Some do it just a couple times a year, but things like geraniums keep coming back and back and back all season long, and so you'll want to just deadhead those constantly. Others are kind of a one and done. So a lot of bulbs are ones that just happen once and then they're done. And so why would you deadhead these? Well, you don't have to, first of all, but think about what is your goal for these. So this is beautiful flower, first of all. When they get older, not so beautiful. So it may be that my goal is actually just to kind of neaten it up, and that's fine. But also it may be that I want the plant not to use all the energy to actually build seeds in here, but instead to use the energy, send it down back into the bulb so that next year it'll come up and be nice and strong. Also, most bulbs will send the energy down and also replicate bulbs. And so you'll get more duplicate bulbs and more growth that way than through the seed spread for most bulb varieties, especially ones that are less and less prolific over the years, such as hyacinth. The type of bulb that you may want to go ahead and let to go to seed are these beautiful Spanish bluebells, and that's because they actually really do go to seed and spread through their seeds and also their bulbs. So no harm in letting those actually go to seed, spread themselves if you've got the room for that. Now the exception, of course, would be if you're in the UK and you've got the English bluebells, because the Spanish bluebells are kind of taking over there, and so you're going to want to stop this growth so that you can allow your native English bluebells to grow and proliferate. A lot of naturalizing types of varieties, you may want to go ahead and let them spread, particularly if they're in an area where, hey, let's get some more flowers and volumes of those. So if you've got that situation, then let them go to seed to naturalize in two ways. They'll do it through seed, but also through the generation of additional bulbs underneath. And particularly I like to do that with Spanish bluebells, and then daffodils really depends on where they are. So I have a whole field of daffodils where I definitely want them to spread more, and also it would be an awful lot of work to deadhead all those, so we let them go a little bit more wild. But in the bed right near the front door, go ahead and deadhead those so that then I can really focus on getting those really strong and impressive flowers next year. The other thing we've got in here is geraniums, and these are ones that have just been overwintered, so they don't look that great at the moment, but they're starting to get leaves, and soon they will be big plants as these start to fall back. The geraniums come up nicely. Now I do that so that I can have never-ending blooms from tulips to geraniums, and then geraniums will last me through the whole summer and the first part of autumn around here, as long as I deadhead them. And I wanted to show that for something like a tulip, it may be easier to use some pruning shears to make a nice clean cut. And you can certainly do that on a geranium as well. But it's also a great example of one that when you see it, you can just snap it off. It's got little areas that are kind of natural spots for it to snap. You snap it off, more stems come up from that. So it's a great way, just grab it, snap it off naturally, and that's the easiest way. So a lot of flowers are easy to do with just pinching. I've got a rose right back here, and that can be done either way. So after the flower is starting to deteriorate, just pinch off the flower part and you're done. Or if you prefer the shears, you can also use those. Here I am with rhododendron, and yes, you can deadhead rhododendrons, and you'll likely to get a second display of beautiful flowers. They actually respond nicely to pruning and will actually grow back more densely and more healthy and beautiful looking with a really kind of, brutal pruning back. There are a number of plants that really like that, and mums or chrysanthemums are one of those. Really, when they start to flower, go ahead and cut that way back. You can even really trim them back like 3-4 times as they're blooming, and you'll even get more and more flowers. Other good plants for that are cardinal flower and also goldenrod. But what happens if I don't deadhead rhododendrons? That's totally fine too. As you can see here, this is a rhododendron tree. And that goes up really high. There's no way I'm going to get those flowers deadheaded, and that's fine. I'll just get my one beautiful display of rhododendrons, and then it'll go and get ready for next year. So deadheading is really a way to increase the number of flowers, but if you don't do it, it's perfectly fine. One good rule of thumb about should you deadhead or not is think about annuals versus perennials. So annuals are the ones that only last that 1 year. So what you're trying to do there is really just enjoy their blooms to the maximum. So almost all annuals, unless they're already self-deadheading, then you want to deadhead those because you'll want to get flower after flower after flower. So those, mostly when you buy them, you'll see if they are self-cleaning or not, and if they're self-cleaning, then that means you don't have to deadhead them. So begonias are a great example of that. And then there are a lot of varieties that are now being developed for different types of flowers that have that. But it is still that most annuals, go ahead and deadhead those, and you'll be rewarded with more flowers. So, get the most out of those marigolds. Now, what about perennials? So perennials can be very different. They're the ones that are a little more complex. And also, think about how you deadhead them. So here we have a bounty of flowers on these herbs. And when I think about deadheading those, for perennials, it's less about wanting to get them to reflower often and more about what's going to happen next year. So you can be much more vicious with them, and you can take them and just really prune them back after they've done their flowering. And that will help them to, again, conserve the energy so that it is really forcing the energy to go into the health of the plant rather than in generating more seeds and things like that. Because if you think about what is the circle of life, it's about trying to propagate again. And so it does send all of its crucial energy energy into generating seeds, and in that can actually weaken itself. But if you want just that healthy perennial plant without it spreading, then go ahead, be vicious with it. It'll actually make it healthier over the years. Over here we have strawberries, and we have lovely blooms on them right now, but I wouldn't deadhead these because I want these to turn into the berries, right? The strawberries. And these have been pollinated, and soon we'll have a berry on here. So we definitely don't want to deadhead those, but it does bring up a whole class of plants that you may actually want them to generate the berries or the seeds for a variety of reasons. One is that they may be very ornamental and, you know, be beautiful berries to have on a plant throughout winter, or you may want to feed the birds or the wildlife in your area, or even harvest them yourself. So do think about that, you know, for plants like an elderflower, you wouldn't want to deadhead it because you'd love to get the berries, and then you have elderberries. So a lot of those plants, let them go because you're going to want to experience the full life cycle. Now, some people like to do that also with roses as well, to really, you know, let them form the rose hips and things like that, and that's perfectly fine. But of course, with getting a bounty of flowers, you may want to deadhead them throughout the whole summer and then just leave it at the end of the year for autumn to let them go to the rose hips, so you can kind of get the best of both worlds. So what about lilacs and other perennial plants that have only one big display per year? Well, you don't have to deadhead them, you won't get any more blooms, but similar to the bulbs, you can think about what is your goal there. If you do want the plant to get stronger, spend its energy on its own plant rather than going to seed, then go ahead and deadhead those. And that would be the same not only for lilacs, but also camellias and peonies. So here we have a beautiful bleeding heart plant, and this is one that we do not deadhead, and it's also a good example of a type of plant that you don't want to deadhead, and that is one that's pretty much still a woodland plant. They will do their own thing. They bloom normally once or twice, but deadheading them doesn't encourage either to happen. So it does like to go ahead and go to seed, and then if there's enough sun in the season, it'll do a second round. But just enjoy them while they are here, and then enjoy the lovely plant after. There are many plants that are like that, ones that come from woodland varieties or even weeds. So like Joe Pye Weed, it's actually a really popular big bush plant with gorgeous lilac flowers on them. That's another one that you don't want to deadhead. Also behind me here is a honeysuckle, and that's another one that takes care of itself. So it will grow more vines so that it can grow more flowers, and it'll take care and drop the flowers that it has as it also goes to seed. So think about anything that is a woodland or kind of from a weed variety. Those you don't normally need to deadhead. So there is one other type of plant that you may want to think about really pruning back, and those are often vines. And many of them only bloom on new growth. So you're going to want to prune those back so that you get lots of new growth, encourage that, and encourage the new blooms that come on that. Now, you'll need to know which varieties you have in that case, so go to readyandthriving.com to check different varieties because you don't want to get that wrong. So some things like hydrangeas, there are varieties that grow only on new growth, and there are varieties that produce flowers only on old growth. So hydrangeas particularly complicated, so know what type you have so that you know exactly what to do with them. So in the beginning, I promised to talk about azaleas and also the different types of plants that sometimes you do deadhead them and sometimes you don't. And it's based on the variety normally. For the azalea, there's actually two different types. So there's the evergreen one, which is what I've got around here, and those you do not deadhead. They get one really great show of flowers and then you're done. For the deciduous ones, so the ones that lose their leaves and then grow back, they are normally reblooming. And so yes, go ahead and deadhead those, and then you'll get a second bunch of flowers. And normally you'll get 2 big bursts of flowers on azaleas that are deciduous. For domesticated plants, there are many that are being developed so they're self-deadheading. So do be aware of which ones you're getting, particularly if you're getting petunias, phyllox, salvia, or zinnias. There are a lot of self-deadheading ones these days. And then even in some other varieties, they're just starting. So the first appearances of self-deadheading roses are coming into being. So do pay attention to those. Those still, the wild varieties or the more historic varieties, all of those you will have to deadhead yourself. There are a couple of plants where you have to be super careful about timing, and you may or may not want to deadhead them because you've gotten there a little too late. A good example of that is the perennials here, which has beautiful little flowers, and as you can see they're starting to drop off now, so I could deadhead those now. However, if I got there too late and they're already going to seed, if I cut them, I'd actually be cutting off the blooms that are already set for next year. So I don't want to do that. So if you can catch them nice and early, then go ahead and do them, but if not, then don't. Hydrangeas are a similar type of plant, so you have to be very careful about those. Often the blooms for next year come in right behind the blooms from this year, and so when you're deadheading, just be careful to get them while they're still really at their glory, but before it gets late in the season and before they really go dry. If you do wait until then, you risk cutting off the growth for next year. So we talked about the big principles of which types of plants do you deadhead, like annuals, and also many flowers, really, that you just want to keep going throughout the whole season. So an awful lot of flowers you want to deadhead. Which ones you don't, or don't benefit from it at all, like those that kind of spring from weeds or are still very much a wild or woodland type of flower. Also, we talked about those ones that, well, it depends. The azalea here, the evergreen one, no deadhead. The deciduous one, yes, deadhead. So you may want to learn more about which types of varieties in particular are the ones that you want to deadhead. If so, go to readyandthriving.com. I've got the full lists of which ones to deadhead, which ones not to, which ones you'll want to decide, and the reasons why you would want to or not. So go to readyandthriving.com and check out the complete list to see if your plants are on the list. There's also more pictures so you can identify them through that. So if you like this video, please like the video and also subscribe to be inspired by other ways to have a beautiful environment around you, to live sustainably, and to help you thrive every day.